Joining us now is retired Colonel Jack Jacobs. He's a Medal of Honor recipient and an NBC News military analyst. And Colonel, I'd like to start by just hearing how you think this war is going right now. First, from the Ukrainian perspective having been invaded, and Russia's perspective.
Well, Ukraine expected this. Don't forget that Putin's been at this, planning this for a long time. He first came to power in 1999. Then there was a break, and he's basically been in business running Russia for the last 20 plus years. 8 years ago, Russia invaded and took Crimea. So the invasion of Ukraine should have come as absolutely no surprise to anybody, and certainly not to Ukraine. They've been expecting it for some time. With respect to how the war is going, well, Russia expected it to be a rollover, and it wasn't. They anticipated that a mere show of force would leave the Ukrainians quaking in their boots and they'd leave. But in fact, exactly the opposite has happened. The free world has been galvanized by the actions of a comedian, Zelensky, who has taken charge and is being followed assiduously by everyone. Even Switzerland, which has not taken sides in my lifetime, even before I was born, has now taken sides in this conflict. So for the Russians, it didn't go exactly as planned. They're having a hard time bringing their forces to bear on Kiev and having their forces go past Kiev to link up with forces coming up from the south, from Crimea, so they could cut the country in half. It is not going well at the moment. But they're bringing in, they've committed the reserve, which is why you see such a long tailback on the road and roads leading to Kiev. So the bad news is that the Russians know what their objectives are, and so they've started to do something nobody wants them to do, even they hadn't planned to do initially, and that is start to bombard population centers. Lots and lots of indirect fire and in the cities, on the cities, and civilian casualties, which will surely mount. In the end, it's not going to do them any good because at the end of the day, sanctions are sure to increase. It's not going to make it any easier to take the city. If anybody should know how difficult it is to fight in a city that's nothing but rubble, it's the Russians who successfully defended Stalingrad with their backs against the river against the Nazis. So the Russians don't want to turn Kiev into rubble, but they're going down that road. And that means that if, as and when they get into the city, they're going to face a persistent, a violent, and very costly guerrilla war inside the city. It's also going to be difficult outside the city because the Russians have a lot of experience driving tanks and armored vehicles around in the countryside. But Ukraine is not all countryside. Lots and lots of cities. It's going to be difficult for the Russians to link their forces up, and we've already seen that. Zelina?
Thank you so much for that really comprehensive analysis. It's so helpful to understand this perspective from each side. One of the reports today from U.S. officials is that Vladimir Putin reportedly is having an unusual outburst of anger at his inner circle over how the war is going, which you just laid out many of the surprising things from the Russia perspective. In terms of Putin doubling down on violence now, you mentioned the civilian populations. What are the other risks associated with him being frustrated and doubling down on the violence as opposed to maybe a diplomatic out with civilian populations in the way?
Wow, it's difficult to see a diplomatic off-ramp for Putin. I was talking with somebody who knows quite a bit about this because he's been involved in negotiations in other conflicts. And he said, and I agree, that it's going to be difficult for Putin to be involved in any kind of negotiated settlement. I guess if it came down to it, you could surmise a circumstance in which Ukraine and Russia would negotiate the withdrawal of Russian troops in exchange for Russia taking control of the Russian-speaking provinces in the east. But we're a long way from that. And Putin perceives and is being told by his yes men that all he has to do is increase the violence, increase the pressure on the Ukraine, on Ukrainians, and eventually they'll fold. That's not going to happen. Ukrainians, the way it's going now, if Russia continues to up the ante, Ukraine's got a hard time defending itself without further assistance, and we're not going to bring troops. NATO's not going to bring troops into Ukraine, and Russia is liable to prevail. But it will be a Pyrrhic victory, Zelina.
One of the things I think we should point out here is that when you say we're not going to put troops into Ukraine, I think what we're not saying is because the stakes here are nuclear powers are involved, right? Russia has nuclear weapons. Putin has threatened. He's put his people on high alert, I think is the term that was used earlier in the week. In terms of the escalation, before we even get to that, what does President Biden have to say tonight to lay out the stakes for the American people? You have the potential for, obviously, Russia has nuclear weapons, but they also have, chemical weapons. They have other types of things that they can use on civilian populations or other enemies of Putin. What does Biden have to say to make the stakes clear for the American people tonight?
Well, I think the American people understand what the stakes are. They've seen a lot of what this war has done to Ukraine. They know exactly what kind of thug Putin is. He's been that way for a long time, and he hasn't changed his spots at all. I think that President Biden probably is going to reinforce all the things that he said until now and point to some of the things we've already spoken about. The amazing solidarity of everybody outside Russia. You have even private institutions, Shell Oil and others, deciding they're not going to do business there. Switzerland, as we recalled, on the wrong side as far as Russia's concerned. I think if the president reiterates that and keeps it in everybody's mind, he will do everything he needs to do in order to galvanize American opinion on the proper side. He's not going to be able to say anything that will convince anybody politically that we need to have our troops anywhere other than where they are now. And by the way, I might add that the majority of American troops that are currently in places like Poland and Romania are there to take care of refugees, which some people estimate will number maybe as many as 4 million, Zelina.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, thank you so much for being here tonight and starting us off and helping us understand the latest. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.